Satan, interviewing. You know that's what they doing. Stick around. It's about to get all roomy up in here. Remote Ruby starts now.
You think Andrew will just mosey in within the next hour?
Who knows? It's early there, right? It's 7 a.m.
It's 7 a.m., but to be fair, we didn't give him any warning this morning. But at the same time, this is the guy that's like, I get up at 2 a.m. and I'm super focused. Yeah. So
it's because he went to bed at 1 a.m., gets up at 2.
Just needs that 1 hour of recharge.
Yeah. Just snorts a line of caffeine. He's ready to go.
Just takes caffeine pills and puts them on the table. God. What's up, dude?
Oh, not much. You're in a new office.
I'm in an office. I rent an office, and it is quiet. My microphone is not set up yet, but I figure DHH record an episode with headphones one time. Why can't I try it, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. That's professional enough for me. What's going on, man? I saw Rails 7.2 Beta 3 came out. There wasn't much at all in there at all. What was on the list? It was like...
Maybe even we talked about it on the show, but I didn't realize that Beta 0,
Beta 2 was
1... Yeah.
Oh, none of them. Yeah. We upgraded right away to 7.2 Beta 1. Everything was good. So Beta 3 that came out yesterday, only sanitize content for action text when present in attachments, couple active record things, condensed inspect, memory
repeat
performance.
That last one.
Which one? Action text?
Yeah.
It says only sanitize content attribute when present in attachments. So I don't know if...
Content attribute, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's changed in the last several years, but I struggled with action text because I just can't use tricks. I know like Andrea and Connor built things that work with action text, so maybe I just need to go look at how they implement
Andrea is totally different.
Okay.
It's not action text backed at all. I don't think.
Okay. Maybe it's just Connor's.
Connor's was, I believe, but Andrea didn't want to have to deal with storing the HTML in the database. The JSON representation is much easier to work with or whatever with TipTap or I forget what. Richard text.
It's TipTap. That's the system like I built at Podia. It was all like JSON based. And so after I did that at Podia, I put that into Jobboardly. But I still have some things that are in action text. And I've been debating, should I try action text again or should I just move everything into my new system? And I think that's what I'm going to do. I just remember there was a really strict set of tags allowed.
There's no way to also say like these tags allow these attributes. So if you allow the source attribute, the source could be on any tag, period, which seemed a little odd to me, but we could probably think that comes from the HTML. What is the gem? The Rails HTML sanitizer or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
We could probably talk to Mike Delasio about that. I've always been curious why that was the way that it was set up. Well, maybe in some cases you want this tag to allow this attribute, but you don't want that attribute on anything else or whatever it might be. It feels rudimentary in that sense. It's very simple.
I get it. If you're just using tricks, it's a perfect like one-to-one mapping. But like I just pretty much every time I even start with tricks, it grows into like I need one more thing that I can add into tricks, but then I have to add into action.
You just got to build simpler products that don't need features.
I think about that every day.
It's funny because Basecamp didn't need tables, so they never built tables. And then it's the active storage story all over again, where it was like, they didn't need public file uploads, so they didn't build it. And then give it to the community, and then everybody's, what do you mean we can't do public file uploads? And then, unfortunately, the JavaScript side is even worse because it's not part of Rails core. It's kind of a separated library that's maintained by only a very small group of people. So it doesn't get much love at all, which really is frustrating. And then they don't even use tricks for Writebook
Yeah, they
for
built
their own
that
product. Yeah,
Markdown, but they're not open sourcing the Markdown stuff, right?
they will, he said. I
Oh,
thought.
they will. Okay. Okay, good.
I don't think it was ready or whatever.
That'll be nice.
Because it's called House MD. Like they gave it a name and all
if they
that.
give it a name,
like,
then it'll be open
I'm
sourced.
I'm sure they're just packaging it and then adding docs and a website and other nonsense for it. But for that, they can cheat. They're not really building a full editor from scratch. They're probably using a tool on the back end, like a pre-written markdown renderer or one that's in JavaScript that's already written for the most part. And then their editor can just kind of let you write text and then preview it. And it's not a full rich text editor. So it's a lot easier library to build because rich text editors are complicated as hell. The content editable thing that was, oh, you just give the user a div and then they can make a rich text there or whatever. It's like, yeah, it doesn't really work that way. Not in practice. So I feel like most people are still very frustrated with tricks. It just needs some extra functionality baked in, like tables and a handful of other things. And it could be great. It could be more extensible. There are lots of little things that just need a better interface for like customizing the toolbar and whatnot. The trouble is it's like 75% of the way. It's not that far from being in a good place. There is some cool stuff for rich text embeds of any active record object, but that requires you to build your own backend and all this stuff for it. And it's not well documented. It just is a shame because it could be so great. It's so close to being great, but so far.
Yeah, the problem I keep running into right now on Jobboardly for job posts, it's fine. You don't really need all that stuff. But the issue I'm having, I wrote off for so long, it's just other people's problems. People be using like third-party extensions and they go to post a job and all of a sudden the rich text lights up. And so there's some kind of like problem with their Chrome plugin or something. Well, that's tell them to disable that plugin. It just keeps coming in as a problem. And so at some point, then it's my problem too. And
yeah,
I don't know that I have. I just feel like maybe it's better to use a rich text editor that is somebody's main focus.
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree. Because if it's not going to get the polish that it needs and the effort and maintenance it needs, it is not a simple thing to build and maintain. So if they're not going to have someone dedicated to maintaining it, then it's all on our shoulders. And we're all going to do the work independently to fix that stuff. But we can't upstream those fixes because they're not going to merge them. So then even if you do the work to fix it in your application, nobody else can benefit from that unless you're going to build a fork of action tricks, which you're not going to do.
Say that. I did it.
Yeah, but you're not going to like want to maintain that. It's so much work. And
I don't, Andrea, Connor, I have such mad respect. I just can't.
Yeah.
When I was building the action text equivalent at Podia early on, when I like realized we want to store JSON, I was like, this is so great. But then like it was pushing a big boulder up a mountain. I thought I was at the top of the mountain, but really I was at the bottom. Okay, you're storing that JSON, but then now you're responsible for rendering all of it. I started kind of an abstraction, and Kevin Newton, and if you don't know Kevin is I'll just call him an AST god, abstract syntax tree god. He like got on a call with me and am I on the right path? And he was like, kind of. And if it wasn't for him, like, I don't know. There's just so much work involved.
Yeah, I used, have you played with Editor.js ever?
No.
It's an open source rich text editor, but
I've seen this.
It's cool because you can save it. You can export the content as JSON, save it in your database, then just take that JSON, send it right back into the editor, and it will render out the nice, pretty stuff. So it's kind of taking care of a lot of that pain, which
we get that
I
with
really like.
we get that with TipTap. We can just send the
Yeah.
JSON back into TipTap. But in terms of like then displaying it, that's where, because we store it in JSON, we're just serving it from the database. That's when we're responsible.
There's no JSON to HTML.
There is, but
It's not what you want. Exactly.
we don't necessarily want to spin up some type of like JavaScript function to render content, right? We just want to render it on the server.
Yeah.
And that also causes
Wait,
problems.
wait,
for
wait.
us.
Hold on. I thought everyone wanted to do all the rendering in the browser.
That is
I
what
thought the pages of your app should only be one.
I think you're thinking about 2022. Now we server render everything, even JavaScript.
Oh. It's like we've come full circle.
I don't know if I talked about it on here, but my coworker Mario and I at least did a 1 month spike on server-side rendering React from Rails. But we were doing it in such a way that when someone would publish their site on Podio, we would actually go ahead and server render all that HTML in a background job and then cache it on Cloudflare. So like it was just instant. And we got it working finally. We used Bun. We learned so many things. And then the problem was just that while it worked, 90% of our components, they use some type of React hook like useEffect, which means even if you server render it, it's actually still just going to reinitialize the entire component every time. And so it was like we did all that work for nothing because it would render and then React would still take it over and just re-render it. We ended up having to like cut 80% of the work we did. It was frustrating.
Dude, that was a pain. The thing I've still been relentlessly trying to do this past 12 months at this point of things like that. How can I simplify, get rid of dependencies, just have less. We are 3 people running, and it was originally just me running 3 products. And
Right.
now we're 3 people still running 3 products, but it's still so much stuff all the time to maintain. To Rails 7.2 is going to be out. We got to go update all of our stuff for that. We got to make sure everything is compatible with that. It is such a pain to deal with some of these things. Just the gems for APIs. I've given up on using any of those. I will never use another API gem again. Just going to use NetHTTP and write my own clients and keep my life easy and only maintain the endpoints that we use and that we care about. It is so much easier.
Yeah, the only exception, oh my God, such a beautiful pun. Just wait for it. The only exception to that rule for me is Honeybadger. Get it? Get it? Exception tracking.
Oh, God. That's true.
Yeah.
I do use that.
But that's just because it's more than just API calls, right? It's hooking into like core
it's
Rails functionality. And so I pulled up editor.js, like you just mentioned, and then they have a link that's like all their plugins. It's not theirs, but it's just plugins people have written. For Ruby, someone has a gem, render editor.js, that will take the JSON and render it to HTML. I literally want to go put this in my app right this second. This is
famous last words.
But everything you and I've been talking about, there's plugins for. Some of it's official, some of it's community plugins. But some of the JavaScript libraries are a thing just about like parse the JSON to HTML and vice versa, parse HTML to JSON. That's actually something we struggled with TipTap on our migration from Trix. And like Andrea and I, like we spent a lot of time trying to just make it work. But the only way we could get Trix to actually convert properly into TipTap was just to actually spin up a TipTap instance with the HTML passed in from Trix. We had so many records, it wasn't feasible. So literally like when we migrated, we literally have to store the old Trix HTML just in a column on our new abstraction. If someone loads it, it will then convert it and start using that. But if they never open TipTap, we just always serve the old HTML for the rest of time.
It's funny. Yeah, Man, why are migrations like that such a pain? We're still playing with the building blocks when it's the thing that developers care about in all of this is, can I have the features that I want? And I do not care about how you store it, how it gets rendered. As long as I can customize and say, like, you're not allowed to put this attribute on these things and we can sanitize it safely or whatever. 99% of the time, I do not care about the details about how
Yep.
rich text editor works. I just want the feature and I want to move on. And maybe at like even something as simple as I cloned the OEmbed stuff that Basecamp has in Tricks. God, I hate their links parsing. I could rant about that for 20 minutes.
We're 20 minutes in. How have we ended up talking about text editors?
Because it's such a pain, right?
Such a pain. How is it an unsolved problem in 2024? Text
It
editors have
seems
been
like-
there for so long.
And some people are building the paid ones. Is TipTap have a paid?
They have
What
a
was the
pro.
one? Oh, they do have a pro, yeah.
We aren't using any of the pro features at Podia. We were able to do
Yeah.
everything with.
It's got other comments API, content API, collaboration,
Yeah,
things that are not what we need.
their big selling point for a while was
Didn't you use or was it Andrea that had there's another paid?
Improvery. I used
Yeah.
Redactor. I used
Yeah.
Redactor and Field Help. I use Article, one of their other ones in Jobboardly, but they've deprecated Article now for like Redactor X. I don't need to replace it.
No,
for, like-
Redactor X is legacy. Redactor Classic is also legacy. Revolve
It's just
app
Redactor
is
now.
yeah, it looks like it's just Redactor now. I do think there's, oh, good God, 500
Yep. I did not pay
basis.
that.
Is that a one-time?
It's a one
It's
time.
like okay. Free updates for 1 year. So it's not really one time. That's the
Well,
funny part about with Jumpstart, we just said we'll call it a subscription because you can cancel and it's the same as this, but it's the framing as like makes it sound like you only pay $500. Next year, you actually have to pay another $500 or whatever it is. 50% discount on renewal. So $250 next year. But it's a funny framing where I guess maybe they make more money by saying like, here it's this big hefty price one time, and then you don't read all of it and think you get free updates or whatever for it. And I don't know. It's strange.
Yeah, their new model, they used to have 3 separate editors, and now they have.
They had that email one.
Yeah, but now what they've done is they bake the email into Redactor at a higher cost. So like you get Redactor, it doesn't come with the email editing.
That makes sense though. Probably if you are doing an email editor, you probably are also going to want a rich text editor for something else. But if you're not,
built an email
then
editor
email
too.
sucks. Yeah.
Built an email editor at Podia. Podia has let me learn so many things, and subsequently let me learn how much I hate so many things.
Until now, observability was metrics, logs, and traces. It was reliability budgets, error rates, and latencies. It was big acronyms on a central dashboard. In short, it was what the ops team cared about, not the developers. But Honeybadger is changing that. Of course, you need the big picture, the single pane of glass that lets you know what your system is doing and that it's operating normally. But individual users matter too. User experience is more than just a line on a dashboard. Honeybadger's observability platform lets you drill down into the details, into the individual user experiences that drive product development and your business forward. It helps you understand your product and your users as much as it does your systems and performance. Honeybadger's free developer plan includes error tracking, uptime monitoring, custom charts and dashboards, and 50 megabytes per day of structured event logging. To get started, visit honeybadger.io. That's www.honeybadger.io.
I've been having one of those weeks. I feel like I'm burning out because of this kind of stuff. I just want to get this done. I don't care about reinventing the wheel on a rich text editor for the 1000th time. I just want to build the damn thing, move on, and I want to be able to use it, get stuff to my customers and let them use it and whatever. We spend so much time with those things that it drives me nuts. A thing I was looking at yesterday, OAuth, sometimes will give you a refresh token, right? So you get an access token, it expires in 2
Sometimes it will.
hours. Yeah, not always. You get an access token that expires in 2 hours. You get a refresh token so you can send it back and say, give me a new token. All right, get this. Some of them give you the same access token back if you OAuth 2 times or more during that current token window, which means that if you're connecting this with multiple devices, they're sharing the same access token for every single one of those, which is weird.
It makes it hard to revoke that.
Well, I guess it's good to revoke. It just revokes everything.
Yeah,
It
like,
makes it
there's no
easier to revoke everything, but not just one device. It's not possible. So like I found that out on, I guess it's Akamai now, but Linode. But if you go through like DigitalOcean's
that.
OAuth,
I didn't know they renamed.
yeah. Well, they got acquired by Akamai.
Who among the VPSs hasn't been acquired?
Yeah. They got acquired 2 years ago in February 2022. No, Linode partnered with them, and then last February, Linode is now integrated into the Akamai brand. Anyways, DigitalOcean, when you OAuth, every single time you OAuth, you get a new access token and a refresh key. So for like Hatchbox, we can save DigitalOcean separately for every cluster so that we've got an easy access to those independently, and we could revoke them independently, whatever, but not with Linode or whatever. So what was it? There was a bug we had. Somebody wanted to swap the DigitalOcean account on one of their clusters, and it was the way we had set it up didn't work because we were like doing a find or create by the UUID from DigitalOcean. So it would get the same team UUID, even if it was different users or whatever. And it was like, dang it. So I may end up having to like combine the user ID and the team UUID, but the official OmniAuth DigitalOcean gem does not include that or whatever. So we have a fork of it that I maintain that swaps the ID with the team ID and whatever else. Pretty sure that should be done using the team ID out of the box, but I swear, man, it's just such a ridiculous thing. Even OAuth and all of these things are always done differently. So you can't...
Even though there's a standard.
Right. And part of it's like tough because in some cases, maybe you need more complex functionality or whatever for these use cases. And so the standard has to be open-ended in some areas to let you decide how you want to handle these things. But because there's no consistency with anything, then we cannot build rich text editors. We cannot build OAuth integrations. We cannot build any of these things without having to get in the weeds every single time. And then you find out what we've got set up right now is fine, but we can't just have this work for every application the exact same way. So we have to like do this one-off work. Maybe we have to rewrite it at some point and migrate data around. And I think this is a lot of why I feel burnout when I'm doing this stuff, because how do we just build it and move on? I want to build it and finish it and not have to worry about this stuff again. I want to be working on more important things for our customers. I want to do new features, come up with new ideas, be creative again. And then like day to day, the software development stuff is just this crap all day long for years. Podia could be light years ahead if it wasn't for having to spend so much time on these rich text editors or whatever other features you've got, video uploads and all that stuff. You would have been able to experiment with way more things, experimenting with new pricing ideas and whatever. Also, another huge pain in the butt because you've got to calculate all that stuff. You can't just easily go do metered billing on your products and all that stuff. It just feels like we're still in the Stone Ages, man. Even though we have Rails, it's got to feel like way more in the Stone Ages if you're using Next.js or JavaScript frameworks to build server-side stuff. Even the front end still. I've said this a few times, and I'm not afraid to say it. A lot of what Turbo did, I think, feels like conceptual compression. It's saved me from doing a lot of work. Stimulus, no, not at all. Stimulus is still jQuery, but a little bit more modern syntax. Not enough conceptual compression there. There's no rendering of templates. There's none of that sort of stuff that I would love to have a bit more of. And the template stuff is kind of being used by Turbo, but it's entirely on the back end. And maybe there needs to be a little template syntax feature in Stimulus or whatever. If we don't have conceptual compression on the JavaScript side of things, guess what we have to do? We have to reach for Vue or React or whatever at a certain point. And it just feels like we're still being held back by a lot of those things. It's 2024. I should be able to build products in half the time. I'm still spending so much time, even with Rails and all the great tools we have. It still feels like it's way slower than it needs to be. Way slower.
The more and more I do, the more and more Jobboardly grows in terms of code, the harder it is to ship a feature. And it's not because I don't know how. I needed to build a little bit complex form the other day. And the whole time I was building it, I was like, man, this would be so much better if I had something reactive.
Yeah.
A React or a Vue. But instead, I'm like manually declaring each field as a target, do this very granular control where, like, in React, hate it all you want. In React, that stuff's very easy because your conditional, I can't think of the exact term they use for it, but like everything lives right there. You conditionally render an element based on a value. It's very declarative, I guess is the term for it. It's just tough. And not everything needs that. But when you do, God, it's painful.
We have a form for Caddy for wildcard, SSL authentication, and Hatchbox. And depending on the host, you have Cloudflare with a access token. You have whatever with access token and a secret access token. You might have one, call it a public key. You might have a private key, whatever. And I still have not written the stimulus controller to hide and show those depending on the select box you chose. It just hide and shows those other fields as needed because some of them have 2 fields, some of them have 3, some have 1, whatever. And that's not terrible. It'd probably be a lot better with the Hotwire combo box library, just hit the back end to get the options or whatever. But that even feels unnecessary to hit the Rails back end just to do something as simple as that. But I have not gone and renamed the labels like I should. I want them to match. If you call it a private key in one service and you call it a secret key in another, I want the label to change according to that. But it's still like a pain in the ass. I got to add a target for it. I got to have some map for all those. I've got to know which ones are which. Do I just have a default value and then we override it for these services and then we pick that? Or do we just force all of them in a big hash to have a label for every single one? Maybe it's empty for some. I don't know. It just feels like so much work to do this little tiny feature that would make the customer's life so much easier. But I'm lazy about it because it's still that much work to do in the JavaScript just for this little thing. And maybe it'd be easier if I could have that. You change the box, then that clears out the fields and then asks Rails to render and insert the new fields. And maybe that's the way that would be simpler. But it doesn't feel necessary to have to make a request to the server to do that. And it's just going to move that same logic to the server instead of client side. So it doesn't really seem necessary either way.
I think that's my biggest struggle is there are a lot of things that Turbo is good for. There's a lot of interactions that require a trip to the server anyway. So it's great to use a Turbo frame, just swap out a small piece of the UI. This is where I really got in trouble back in like 2019, 2020, when we started using Stimulus Reflex. I was just so enamored with the idea of just let the server do all of it. And it does make it easier for the developer, but I think it comes at a cost. It's like a worse UX. Everything goes to the server. You do have to like find the balance. But then I feel like we got the server part down. We can let the server replace some of these things and you don't have to do everything in JavaScript. But what the hell do we do for everything else? So,
yeah. If I don't need all the pluralization and other awesome helpers or active record object to render a form or something. I miss, and I haven't reached for it for a long time, but I miss mustache templates and stuff in JavaScript. They were super simple. And I know that you can just do string interpolation a lot cleaner these days in JavaScript. And maybe that's what I should be doing. But it just feels like there should be a little extra tooling around that in a Hotwire or something. Something's missing. Definitely missing. I'm not sure exactly what it is. And I don't have time to go experiment like I would like to.
That's the thing. The other day I was building something. Oh, it was this complex form I was talking about. And I was, man, maybe I should just do this whole form in Alpine. Alpine's very like Vue.js. It then felt like I was building too much in the HTML. There's just so much Alpine code. And I'm going to make a generalization here. And I'm not talking about everyone. Typically in the Rails community, there's very like vocal group about how awful the entire JavaScript ecosystem is. I don't think the whole thing is bad. I do think there are things I certainly want to use and adopt from it. I don't want to do everything in it. I just told you how awful it was trying to server-side render all this stuff, right? There's balances. And I wish we had more people helping us.
I feel like that's the hardest part of building applications these days, because you might be lucky enough to work at a company that is, let's say, as profitable as 37 Signals, where they can afford to write their own everything from scratch, their own framework, their own queue adapter, caching framework, you name it. And it took them forever, absolutely forever, to build TurboLinks and then to just simply handle forms. And Hotwire is where it is today, but it still requires so many people to be paid to do this research work, to figure out what is the next conceptual compression, what's the next abstraction, because that's where we're stuck right now, I think, with most of these things. I know how to save JSON and I know how to save HTML, and JSON's easier to work with, to render and interact with when we're building an editor. But we eventually need HTML to render in the browser. So our rich text editor has to do one or the other. Both have problems. JSON is not native HTML. HTML is not as easy to edit, yada, yada. And we end up in the weeds here where it's like we really just need some good minds to have the Xerox Park. Yes. Here, you got 7 years to go work on this project. Try a bunch of crazy things, figure it out. And eventually you'll probably come up with a really great abstraction or solution or whatever you want to call it that makes this a lot easier for everybody. But the day-to-day for us is I got customers, got bills to pay, got people to support, and we can only do so much of that R&D kind of work. And I'd love to do more and more of that. It would be great. There are little things that I've been able to afford to do, like notifications and payments and the referral gem I just wrote and whatever, because Jumpstart customers need it. I've already made a video on a very simple version of this for GoRails or something in the past. So let's extract it and make it a gem and kind of try to solve the problem in the long term as an abstraction that way, rather than having people to be stuck in the weeds all the time. Those are still small projects. Like the referral gem was 2 days of work or whatever, not something like Hotwire in general that requires a few years, some real products to be tested on. That's, I think, why you see React version numbers are very similar to now that's what I call music CDs. We're on version 237. Maybe every React version comes with its own music album as well at this point.
It's React's like, we're version 19.200,000. Their major numbers are still, this is hard. This is a hard balance. I'm not necessarily complaining about the tools we have because they're free. I'm just wishing there was something that met in the middle between having to use something like React and having to like kind of hand wire everything myself, because using React comes with a lot of other baggage. I think that's the problem for me, is I don't want all the baggage around having to use something like a React or a Vue. I like the tools themselves. I don't like all the work
I
involved
think
around it.
there's definitely a middle ground. There's nobody playing in that space. The hard part is so many people just want to go build. So they grab React, Vue, Hotwire, and just go work and use it and then work around all the rough edges. But there's 1% of people who are actually trying to do the work of, this is a rough edge. Why don't we try and fix that or improve that or whatever? And that's such a small group of people. It's a lot harder work as well. You have to do this stuff in real applications and have real problems to apply it to. Because if you don't, you're going to end up building stuff that really isn't real world applicable. Or in the case of React, it came from Facebook. So they had all of these massive company requirements that are not necessarily going to apply to every business, every small team. They're very different. So what we're seeing, I think, is, okay, Hotwire is some tools. Turbo is really the big piece of that, does all the heavy lifting. But I wish Stimulus had more heavy lifting for that extra piece. And I haven't seen products out of 37 Signals that need a lot of that. Yeah, they don't do that work.
And that's why I don't feel like I have it right. I'm frustrated, but it's not like with 37 Signals. It's not with anybody working on that stuff. I'm just frustrated because I have different problems and I want to stay in this world that I'm in.
And you want to contribute back if you can. And it's hard to do that. They have their own issues in Laravel. Like, they are a company and have more intention to solve these problems than Rails core team does, because they're a business serving just their framework customers. But they have 7 different authentication libraries, and people are like, what the hell is this? And why do I use one over the other, over the other, over the other? And they're like, well, great question. They're building a few products of their own, but they're not building products like everybody is building. Some people in Rails are building Rails API only stuff. And that's a very different set of needs than people building the Hotwire approach or anything in the middle. And so you really have to have these projects in every end of the spectrum in order to have a well-rounded set of libraries. And we don't have a well-rounded set of libraries because people are working on very specific applications instead.
There is something I want to shout out. I was working in Stimulus the other day, and I thought a lot of my problems would be solved if there was a way to do reactivity in Stimulus. And I found this package. I'll have to find it. If you just Google like reactive Stimulus, it's someone who is basically taken the Vue.js reactivity approach. Vue actually, I think, even has a library for their reactivity. It's what Caleb uses in Alpine.js for his reactivity. And so somebody built a Stimulus package for it. When things change, it fires and runs. And it wasn't quite what I needed, but I was like, this is along the lines that I think it would just make it better for me. If there was a way to somehow utilize templates in reactivity, I think I could get most of what I need out of Stimulus. Because I love the values API was a good addition. Targets has always been a thing that's good. The callbacks for values are good.
The thing with my little example of the caddy wildcard stuff is ideally I just have the one field on the page. And if you choose one of those options instead of none or whatever the default blank one is, I want to render the fields and I don't want to have to hit the server for that. It would be nice to just do a DOM diff of the labels changed, whatever, you swap it. And maybe you chose the wrong one, and maybe we don't want to clear out the values that are for the public and private keys or whatever. Maybe we just want the labels to change or something. But if you select none, I probably want to remove those. And that would either require round trips to the server, building a bunch of routes, building a bunch of ways to render that, a bunch of templates on the server. And if we had a little, hey, this field changed, and I know we can do like a data action for that, but then we have to do all the logic in there of this changed and here's the stuff. It would be cool to more have here's the old value, here's the new value of the select box, and then go do what you want. And if we just abstracted that, so here the data changed for this form, then my logic doesn't have to be like, well, for all of the targets, if it's this, then do this. If it's this, then do that. It would be more simple. Blow it all away, render what I need, done. Because
Yeah.
I don't want to have to do all the conditionals and everything. And that's where my stimulus controllers end up way messier, because they're like loop through every single one of the targets and then handle each one accordingly. And that is part of why when you're writing your templates in React or something, it's if this, then show it and render this.
And it's all data
Otherwise-
driven.
It's not doing the diffing kind of stuff. That's the style of code I have to write, where it's add the hidden class to this if this value is whatever. And it just is harder to think about rather than here's the current value. What do you want this to look like? And that's the kind of code you write in these other frameworks. And it's way simpler to understand. So you can do your development faster, which I think is more what I want long term, to be able to write.
Right, React. That's what I heard.
Yeah. Oops. But there are different languages that you can define the same method name, but with different arguments. And so like the conditionals end up being
Overloading,
broken out.
method overloading.
Yeah, that's the name. And it's like, well, this is awesome because now my function doesn't have to say, if you gave me these things, then do this
Yeah.
one thing. Otherwise, do this other thing.
That's what's
The
beautiful
conditional
about-
is moved at a higher level of abstraction that you never even touch, except for defining those different method names or arguments. And it's such a cool thing. And that's the sort of, ooh, now I don't have to worry about these things anymore
Yeah.
that I'm looking for in something.
That's one of Elixir's strengths, because not only do they have method overloading, but they actually
Mhm.
look at the type of your arguments.
We do that in
structure,
Ruby.
pattern
And
matching,
we just say, like, is it a duck? Yes, they're all ducks.
everything quacks. I do want to say though, I mean, we kind of just changed into backend language here, but I also think the problems you and I are describing also speak to how good, at least for me, Rails is. The other things I'm complaining about are server-side code, and it feels like Rails really nailed that. Feels like the problems we
Yeah.
have are like good problems, right?
I agree. I wish I could more easily split up this form into multiple things, and you still have a little bit of building your own form object. And,
Oh yeah, totally.
you know, there are times where you run into little things that feel like something's missing in Rails for the
And you
most
know how
part.
to solve it.
Yeah.
You
And
have
it's
the
just a
tools
little
to
bit
solve
of,
it.
yeah. It's just a little bit of, it'd be cool if we had an abstraction for that, but we don't really need one. We've already got active model, and that can be a form object pretty easily that we can pass off to different active record objects or whatever. But yeah, it feels like that's been much more thoroughly thought through. That is a good point.
I was just thinking about that because I'm like, everything we've been complaining about is all front end
Yeah.
text editors.
It still is one of the things that is changing so much. There's now the dialogue element finally. The popovers
Yeah.
are coming soon, and
The
soon,
details
hopefully,
element's wonderful.
and soon, like hopefully, you won't have as much of that. Oh, we got to build tooltips with Tippy, and it's got to be from scratch, and that stuff gets very frustrating to like grab libraries. You want to just build a simple modal. You got to grab a
Really?
library for it. It's got 1,000 configuration options.
I miss Bootstrap in that regard. And subsequently, am really looking forward to using WebAwesome.
Yeah.
If you're a backer,
really
they just
like-
released their first run of free components just to look at. So
Oh, cool. I can't remember if I backed it or not. I know I was intended to. I'll pay the full price if I have to, but yeah, that's the kind of stuff that's really awesome. Like the web components concept is just so cool. These are elements. You just work with elements. One of the hard parts is, yes, the HTML you've already got is kind of nice with stimulus, except when it's, I wish that I didn't have to write all of these extra attributes to wire up the functionality. I wish that it could just be invisible to me as the user. And that's been a fun thing too, is comparing your stimulus stuff where you've got to add data actions to all these things. If you already know the structure, why can't it just detect that, target and add the event listeners itself, or add the attributes itself on connect or whatever, And I've been doing that a little bit more where it's, okay, I can drop in this copy to clipboard feature. And if there's a button, then we'll just add the data action on the click on the button to copy the clipboard text. And it's one of those nicer things where the controller doesn't need to like have the HTML do all the wiring up, which is part of what gets messy when you're like got complex components. So one day we'll have better approaches to the stuff. But today it feels like I spend an inordinate amount of time on these types of things that I wish I didn't have to.
Yeah.
Is this what it felt like writing assembly back in the day? I just want to print a string on the screen, but I got to move these things about and whatever.
I don't know. I think if they would have known about Webpack, they would have been like, assembly's fine.
They
This
would
is
have been
good.
like, let's never tell anybody about this internet thing.
Somebody shared, I gotta go, but somebody shared the thing on X or Twitter, whatever you call it. And it was a newspaper clipping. And it was, the internet's just a fad. Like hundreds of thousands of people give up on using the internet. And it just didn't age very well.
If only.
Well, good
If
to
only
catch
we were
up.
so smart. Yeah, good to rant with you this week. I don't know. This is one of those things this week has been really frustrating with various little things that I'm like, they should not take this long.
Oh,
And
I want to say paper cuts, but they're really like cardboard cuts.
yeah, someone made a cardboard shank and stabbed me with it. Yeah.
Okay, see ya.